Welcome and welcome back to my channel Proofrock's Life and Library. In this video we are going to discuss about Russian literature. This is the collection. So without any further ado, let's get started with the Okay, so before I suggest you my favorite books and I recommend you some, let's first discuss about Russian literature as a whole. So Russian literature is something I feel that is less discovered and less delved into. That is how I feel about it, because not many people talk about Russian literature in detail as much as they do about other literature from other countries. So Russian literature, personally speaking, is one of my most favorite, because I feel there is a lot of depth inside the book, within the texts, and it is more psychosocially realistic in nature. And the books, most of the writers, they have gone deep into searching the truths of one's psyche, of the human psyche. Also, as well, they have gone in detail about searching the truth about social hierarchies. So there are writers like Dostoevsky, whose main priority is to focus on the psyche of the human being, while there's a Tolstoy, whose main focus has been the social realms of the society, of the scenario or whatever. So and also I feel when we talk about Russian literature, we mostly refer to Nabokov, because that is one common book that is almost usually heard about. But to me, the names that come in mind when I talk about Russian literature is Fyodor Dostoevsky, Leo Tolstoy, and Anton Chekhov. So these are the three main writers we are going to talk about today, and some other writers as well, like Maxim Gorky. What I have always felt is that Russian literature, the books that I am going to talk about, they are all layered. The surface seems about something else, while it gets deep and delves more into the psyche, or suppose the social hierarchies, the mention about the hierarchies. So Russian literature, I feel, is very layered in nature. Also, there are writers like Mikhail Bulgakov, whose write-up seems like a fantasy, a fairy tale kind of a write-up, but it actually delves into the political scenario, the oppressions, the revolts, the rebellions, and all of that. And personally, I am more inclined to Russian literature because it has always helped me to ask questions, to raise questions for a why. There are things that are naturally accepted by people, but Russian literature tends to question the normalization of everything. This is the only reason perhaps that I am more inclined to Russian literature. Now, the first book that we are going to talk about is obviously Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. So there are quite a few books that comes up to the mind when we talk about Dostoevsky. Probably Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, Notes from the Underground. But Crime and Punishment has always been my favorite for various reasons. Now, there is a book to every reader that has changed their way of life, of their thinking, and so on. This is the book that has really helped me to become a more empathetic person, or a better person, someone who thinks it through. So the character here, Raskolnikov, is suffering from poverty, and he makes a crime. So I'm just telling you the gist of the story, and more focusing more on the themes. So he commits a crime. He goes on to steal from a pawn woman, and while he's in the process, he gets anxious, he kills the woman, and he's unable to steal the money as well. He only takes up a few. That is the first part of the book. And the second part, that is a crime. And the second part of the book is the punishment, where Raskolnikov destroys himself. He is declining into nothing because of the guilt he has within himself for the crime he has committed. So there are various ways of punishment. That is what I have learned from this book. And the reason for the crime is the crime in itself. So this book has made me think more about poverty as the criminal rather than Raskolnikov as the criminal. The next book we are going to talk about is The Brothers Karamazov. This is yet another favorite, and this is a pretty long book. It's 900 pages actually. And the main characters of this book are a father, his 3 sons, and there's another son but who is illegitimate. So the Karamazovs, each Karamazov character, there could have been a book on each of them itself. And this book is highly philosophical. And also it talks about faith a lot, about one's belief system and what they believe in. So I feel more than philosophy, it can be called this book can be categorized under the genre of theosophy. It's theological and philosophical as well. So also, as I was talking about the questions these books raise, the questions I found that are reasonable from this book are like, what is actually freedom? Like, freedom can be subjective, but that is what the answer is, perhaps, that I have derived from this book. But it has asked me to ask the question that what is freedom and who is the evil, and also questions like what is faith actually. So this is Brothers Karamazov. The last 2 books that I would recommend of Dostoevsky are Notes from Underground and the Double, and The House of the Dead. So Notes from Underground and the Double is a marvelous book. The book actually talks about an alienated human being living on the edges of the modern society, and the book is a confession. This person is describing his being, the state of his being. So this is completely psychological, and Dostoevsky has documented the nuances of one's psychology, the imprints of trauma in one's psyche. So the detailing of psychological connotations in this book is transcendental, I feel. And The House of the Dead is actually a kind of autobiography, but it's written from a fictional point of view. And this book actually documents the Siberian prison camp experience of Dostoevsky, because he had been there because of a political conspiracy. And this book, I feel, is more of a real life documentation of Dostoevsky. So that's it on Dostoevsky. And before I move to the other writers, I would like to end this with a quote of Dostoevsky that he wrote in The Brothers Karamazov. And it says, I quote, "Above all, don't lie to yourself. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to a point that he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, and so loses all respect for himself and for others. And having no respect, he ceases to love." So that's on Dostoevsky. So the next writer we are going to move on to is Leo Tolstoy. And in this video, we are only going to talk about this masterpiece, that is The War and the Peace. This is probably I think it is one of the longest books ever written. And as I said, like, Tolstoy is much more on the social realistic spectrum. And this book has some amazing characters, and I think the character of Natasha in this book is about whom Tolstoy starts while she was 13 and ends on while she's the mother of 4 children. So that is the greatest female evolution Tolstoy has ever written. And apart from Natasha, there are 2 other interesting characters like Andrei and Nikolai, through whom Tolstoy has projected what happens when your faith towards God, faith for God, turns into a similar kind of faith for the emperor. And this book shows the social hierarchies that were present in the contemporary Russia. And also there is a continuous language shift between Russian and French. And in this copy, obviously the Russian part is written in English. So the rich at this time spoke in French, and it was considered as a socially higher thing to do. So people spoke in French, and then someone would reply in Russian. So this book has that. There's a language shift, continuous shift in language. And also there's a lot of meandering around the nature and the social aspects of the scenario. So this is that. And since characters like Nikolai and Andrei, Tolstoy has talked about their faith for the emperor a lot. So the fun thing would be, what if Dostoevsky had written these 2 characters? How would he have portrayed this paradigm shift in the objectification of faith, that is from God to emperor? That would be an interesting to see. The next book that I would like to talk about is The Master and Margarita. It's written by Mikhail Bulgakov, and this is perhaps the most interesting book I have read in all of Russian literature, also because of the backstory of this book. So let me tell you one of the most impactful quote from this book, and it says, "Manuscripts don't burn." Now, why this line is more impactful is because the first manuscript that was written by Bulgakov of this book was burned, because he was living in the Stalinist Russia, and the book had been in censorship for 27 long years. So he had burned his manuscript, and then again after 27 years later this book was published, that too posthumously. So this book is kind of a fantasy, magic realism, and it obviously metaphorically talks about Stalin's Russia. There's crucifixion of Jesus, there's love, there's a talking cat. It's very fantastical in nature. I would suggest you to read this book because it has been one of the interesting reads so far. The next writer I would like to talk about is Anton Chekhov. So I feel, and it's also been said, that Anton Chekhov is the god of short stories. So I do have a book of plays by Anton Chekhov, and I have 2 books on his short stories, among which this one, which has Ward Number 6 and Other Stories, 1892 to 1895. This book is my most favorite because of 2 stories. One is Ward Number 6 and the other is The Black Monk. So I feel very deeply for Anton Chekhov, and I'd also written an article on him, which I think I will link in the description, and if you want you can check that out too. So Ward Number 6, there are too many stories to talk about Chekov, but I would like to talk about Ward Number 6 because so I would talk about this story in particular because this story has transcended the definition of 2 binary oppositions, that is of sanity and insanity. So there's a doctor and a patient. The doctor is a very intellectual person, and he tries to intellectualize everything and even pain. And this the other person, the other protagonist of the story, he has his first-hand experiences of trauma and of his pain. So there's a very meticulously formed debate between these two. One who is well informed and intellectualizes pain and trauma, and the other who has felt it in real. So the story is also within an asylum, and there is one quote that says, "Once prison and lunatic asylums exist, someone has to live in them." So I feel each and every line of Chekov's stories is they portray some meaningful insight. There's a lot in the lines and as well as in between the lines of Chekhov's story. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Mother by Maxim Gorky. This book was written while Gorky was on his trip to the United States in 1906, and this book actually summarizes the 1905 defeat of Russian first revolution. And this book can be called or categorized in the domain of agitprop literature. Now, agitprop means agitation and propaganda. So this was a propaganda for Maxim Gorky because he wanted to spread the word and talk about the proletarian movement among his readers. So that was the primary motive of this book, The Mother. And this talks about the class division, the hierarchies, the workers, the laborers, and much more. Although after completing this book, I found a sheer resemblance with Mahashata Devi's Hajar Churashir Ma, or Mother of 1084. So this book does not summarize the psychological implications that I was talking about that Russian literature has, but it clearly describes the political scenario about Russia. And also there's a play written by Bertolt Brecht on this book. The play was performed in 1932 and it is named The Mother as well. So the next, so there are few other writers that are well popular as well as well read in the domain of Russian literature as a whole, like Nabokov or Nikolai Gogol and so more. This is also a Russian book from a Russian writer that I recently purchased. It's by Mikhail Shlokov, and the title of the book is "And Quite Flows the Dawn." Although I haven't read this book, I have recently thrifted it, and hopefully I will update soon after I'm done reading. So this has been a long conversation, and I wish to make a series on Russian writers individually as well. Till then, see you in the next video, and I hope you like it, and if you do, please like, share and subscribe. Bye bye.